Ladies and gentlemen, at this time we're going to start the funeral service of Sergeant Leroy L. Levy. We welcome those of you who are joining us via live stream. Rabbi Moshe Wolf, chaplain for the Chicago Police Department, will be officiating. For those of you here present, please take a moment to be sure that your cell phone has been turned off. In just a moment, the rabbi will begin the sacred funeral ceremony.
I almost feel hesitant to tell you to stop talking because of the services, because everybody has a Leroy story. We're all here today for one reason, and that's to bid a final farewell to Sergeant Leroy. But he touched us, it's almost like he was larger than life. For those of us who had the pleasure of knowing him, and I had the pleasure of knowing him close to 40 years. Everybody has a story. He lived life, he loved life, and he touched everybody in a different way. So what I would ask you to do is remember all these Leroy stories and share them with the family. If it's during when they come back for the Shiva, or if you want to jot it down and send them an email, or if you remember that joke that Leroy told you, or if you just how he affected your life, share it with him, because seldom do we meet somebody. Leroy was 92 years old, but he lived 92 years. And he touched everybody's life a little bit differently. So keep that in mind. We begin our services with selected passages. Adonai nasan v'Adonai lakach yehi shem Adonai mevarach. The Lord has given and the Lord has taken away. Praise be the name of the Lord. Kol omikra v'ama moekra. Kol habasach tzitz v'chol chazdol ketzitz hasadeh. Yavesh chatzin avel tzitz keruach Adonai nashvavoy. A voice says, cry out, and I say, what shall I cry? All flesh is grass, and all its beauty is like the flower of the field. The grass withers, the flower fades when the wind of the Lord blows upon it. Surely the people are grass, the grass withers, the flower fades, but the word of our God shall endure forever. And from Psalms 103, tender as a father with his children, the Lord is merciful with his worshipers. He knows how we are fashioned. He remembers that we are but dust. The days of man are as grass. He flourishes as a flower in the field. The wind passes over it and it is gone, and no one can recognize where it grew. But the Lord's compassion for his worshipers, his righteousness to the children's children, remain age after age unchanging. From Psalm 73, Kol ha'she'eri olavavi, sur lavavi v'chelko lehim li'olam. My flesh and my heart may fail, but God is the strength of my heart. He is my portion forever. And from Isaiah we pray, fear not, for I am with you. Be not dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you, I will help you, I will sustain you through my power. The 23rd Psalm, I believe it's in your booklet. On the inside cover page. I'll recite it in Hebrew and then we'll recite it together, please. Mizmor LeDavid, Adonai Roi Lo Yechzar, Binos Deshe Yarbitzeini, Amei Menuchos Yenahaleni, Nafshi Yeshove V'yancheni B'maglet Tzedek L'man Shemo, Gam ki elech begeit salmoves, lo ira ra ki atoi imadi. Shiftecha mishantecha hemo yenachmuni, tarech lefon ha'shulchan neged soireroi, v'shanta b'shem roishi koisi ravoyoi, ach tov v'chesed yudafuni koyim echayoi, v'shafti b'veis Adonai liyorech yomim. Together in English, please. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me in paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest the table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou anoint my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. And from Ecclesiastes we pray, for everything there's a season, for every experience under heaven, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to uproot what is planted, a time to tear down and a time to build up, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to grieve and a time to dance, a time to throw stones and a time to gather stones, a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing, a time to seek and a time to lose, a time to keep and a time to discard, a time to tear and a time to sow, a time to keep silent and a time to speak. And even though now we speak, it's really a time of silence, because when God shows us a moment as such where we have to say goodbye to a loved one, it's beyond our understanding, but we speak anyway. And as I was sitting last night preparing my thoughts, when it comes to Leroy, it just lets itself speak. He touched us in so many ways. Is it Leroy the dad, Leroy the grandfather, Leroy the husband, Leroy the sergeant, the president of Shomrim, a friend, a mensch, a mentor? Speak to any one of the younger officers that were working while Leroy was working. He had something to say to everybody. And that was Leroy. He felt it his obligation to mentor everyone who came his way. I'm going to read the obituary, and we're going to be hearing from friends and the children and grandchildren. There is so much to say, but I just want to leave you with one parting thought from the prophet of Micha. Prophet of Micha says, what does God want from us? What kind of life does God want us to live? And he says three things. Do kindness, pursue justice, and walk humbly with God your Lord. And I was thinking that encompasses Leroy. He lived his life doing kindness with other people, never missed an opportunity to be there for any organization and for any, as we say in Hebrew, chesed, charity and kindness. He was always there in the forefront. He lived the life of justice, a sergeant of the police, and he walked humbly with God. And that was Leroy. Go in peace and rest in peace. Please let me share the obit that the family wrote together, please. Leroy Levy, 92 years old, was born May 28, 1932 in Chicago, Illinois. Leroy graduated from Harrison High School. He then went to Wright Junior College and finished 2 years of John Marshall Law School. He also attended Theodor Herzl College. He then met Irma Putterman at a party, and the rest is history, and attended the Chicago Police Academy. As a rookie in 1957, Leroy solved a burglary crime spree that was promoted to patrolman, and at that time, he was the youngest ever to be promoted to patrolman. And our brother, Sonny Lukatsky, shared the story real briefly. Leroy was home. Somebody knocked on the door to sell magazines. Leroy felt something wasn't right. He followed the guy, and after they pinched the guy gave up the man in the car who was sitting there, and they solved over 100 burglaries. Pretty impressive. He soon became a sergeant of police and spent most of his years at the 20th District on Foster Avenue. He then moved to police headquarters in the Fingerprint Division, and then went to gun registration, and then the court section on 26th in California, and various other branch courts. Leroy retired in 2000 after a distinguished 43-year career of serving and protecting the citizens of Chicago. While a policeman, Leroy was among the founders of the Shomrim Society of Illinois, an organization of first responders of the Jewish faith. Leroy held every elected office of the Shomrim Society and served as president from 1987 through 1988. He mentored many young patrolmen and dedicated his life to helping them learn how to navigate the tough streets of Chicago. Leroy married Irma on October 6, 1956, and they married for 67 years until her recent death in August 2024. We really didn't think that it's going to be that close that we'd gather here again. I'm sorry, They lived in an apartment on the west side and then bought their first and only home in West Rogers Park in 1964. Leroy was fun-loving, gregarious, outgoing, a storyteller. He loved entertaining his many friends and even his son's friends. Everyone loved Leroy. He was not always politically correct, really. And, no, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I just couldn't resist, I apologize. And you would hear some spicy language in all his stories. But he loved people, loved connecting with them, and loved helping them. Leroy was a loyal Chicago sports fan with particular pride in the Cubs, Bulls, and Bears. He never went anywhere without wearing a sports cap. He loved everything politics, local and national, and was the smartest man we knew. You could ask him and he would tell you. His wealth of knowledge and memory was remarkable. Leroy was a wonderful and devoted, caring husband, father, papa, friend, mensch, and friend to many. He was a tough-as-nails cop and dedicated his life to Irma, the boys, and the Chicago Police Department. Leroy was preceded in death by his loving wife of almost 68 years, Irma, and is survived by the 3 devoted sons, Steve and Lisa, Daniel and Lisa, Robert and his late wife, Patricia, also survived by his former daughter-in-law, Sandy. Leroy, Papa, is survived by 3 precious grandchildren, Adam and Leah, Alyssa and Ashley, Jared and Nina, and by his 3 great-grandchildren, Ashton, Adina, and Teddy. Leroy is predeceased by his great-grandson, Trey, by his parents, David and Esther Levy, and by his sisters, Betty Finocchio and Gloria O'Mallon. And I'd just like to share just one short thought that Leroy's son shared with me that I'd be remiss if I didn't share it with you. A little about Dad. You knew him well. Above all, he was loyal and honorable. That was the most important thing to him. His word and his handshake, old school. He was a shomer, a guardian, a protector of his children, his wife, and his friends. Dad loved to laugh. He was a joke teller, a storyteller, and I just found out that he was a chazan. He was a singer in all his bar mitzvahs, and the weddings, he was a leading man. People looked up to him. He wanted us boys to be better than him and to make him proud. I hope we made Dad and Mom proud. We did the best we could to honor them and take care of them. I just need to address the family and the children and the grandchildren, the love, the honor, and the respect that each and every one of you showed your mom and dad is second to none. I want you to find comfort in that. I want you to find that those moments were not easy. Those moments actually were sometimes very, very difficult, and each and every one of you never gave up. When I say never gave up, I mean to say the respect and the honor and the love you showed your parents should always be a source of strength and comfort to you and the family. Amen. I now have the honor and privilege to call up one of Leroy's most devoted and dedicated friends, Deputy Chief of the Chicago Police Department and past President of the Shomrim Society, Chief Bruce Rotner, to say a few words, please.
Moish is a tough act to follow, isn't he? I mean, you basically said everything I was going to say, Moish. So.
I apologize.
Thank you for that.
Worth hearing again.
You know, law enforcement was never a traditional path for young Jewish men and now Jewish women. And a young Leroy Levy knew this when he joined the Chicago Police Department in 1957. But he sought out and he found other Jewish police officers, very small number back then. And together in 1959, they formed the organization, the Shomrim Society of Illinois, which today still remains the oldest religious law enforcement organization in the Midwest. I joined the Chicago Police Department in April of 1972, and that same month I went to my first Shomrim meeting at the old Pickle Barrel restaurant up at Western and Howard. I see some smiles on people's faces, they remember that. And the first person I met, the first person who greeted me, was Leroy Levy. But he didn't say, "Hi, I'm Leroy Levy." He said, "Hi, I'm Sergeant Leroy Levy." And Leroy intimidated me naturally. But when he said sergeant, those of you in the police world know when you're a recruit, that's really intimidating, right? In the ensuing years, I watched Leroy ascend through the hierarchy of the Shomrim Society. As the rabbi said, he held every elected office and finally became president in 1987. And during those years, Leroy became not only a close friend to me, but also to many other young Jewish officers who joined the Shomrim Society, or maybe didn't join the Shomrim Society. Leroy didn't care. Leroy was passionate. He was passionate about our organization. I don't remember him ever missing a monthly meeting until recent years. He would write things down in a notebook and would argue vigorously, and some of you who were at those old meetings remember that, about issues he felt might negatively impact our organization. Our dinner dances in the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, even to the 90s were elaborate affairs, primarily because Leroy was the chairman of our dinner dances and our ad books for many, many years. He attended all of our events every year, always accompanied by the true love of his life, his wife Irma. Everything I learned about the Shomrim Society and everything else served me well, as I served 3 times as president of the Shomrim. And when I was fortunate enough to be promoted to deputy chief in 2008, the first person to call me and congratulate me was Leroy. And I never forgot that. And I also never forgot in that same conversation, he says, "Maybe you can help me move a kid from here to here." And those, again, of you in the police world understand that. And that was also Leroy. The Shomrim Society owes a huge debt of gratitude to Leroy for paving a path to today's Jewish law enforcement officers to follow. We will be forever grateful to Leroy, and I will never forget my friend. Thank you very much.
I call on Leroy's grandchildren, Jared and Adam, to please come to the podium.
My papa was a great man. He had this energy about him that drew people in and made everyone feel comfortable. He was funny, but also serious and tough. Papa lived a very interesting life and always had stories to share. He was smart and witty and knew a lot about a variety of topics. He was a simple guy and loved nothing more than sitting in his chair, reading the newspaper, watching the news or a Chicago sports game while chewing on a cigar. Papa also loved hats, and my love for hats actually stemmed from him. He gave me quite a few over the years. Some were in good shape, some were beat up, but all of them had a story. One time he gifted me one of his favorite Chicago Bulls hats that he wore all the time. I told him I couldn't accept it, knowing how much he loved it, but he wouldn't let me leave the house until I took it. That's just the kind of person Papa was. He was kind and giving, but also stubborn. All these qualities are what made Papa truly one of a kind. Thank you for everything, Papa. I love and miss you very much. Rest easy.
All right, when I think about Papa, 3 words come to mind: tough, intelligent, and storyteller. Anyone who knew him would probably agree that tough is an understatement. He was actually quite intimidating. He was no nonsense and brutally honest. When I was a little kid, he would essentially use police tactics on me as a way of showing his love. In place of hugging, he'd trap me in his arms and tighten his grip if I tried to move. In place of kissing, he'd do the same and rub his sharp beard on my face. The key to getting him to stop was to show him I was tough enough to not be bothered by it. But the older I got, the less intimidating he became. He developed a bit of a soft spot for me. Whenever I'd visit, he'd always have the biggest smile on his face. My visits would be long. We'd talk about anything and everything. He never ran out of stories. He always made me feel important. And when I say anything and everything, I really mean it. Papa was one of the most intelligent people I've ever met. He was so knowledgeable about any topic imaginable, which is unfathomable for someone who never used a computer or browsed the internet in his life. He also had a memory unlike any other. Just 3 weeks ago, he was telling me and my mom stories about his childhood in great detail, stories from over 70 years ago, with details about what someone was wearing on a certain day or the address of a certain location he was at. To no one's surprise, though, we always bonded over Chicago sports. Papa never went anywhere without wearing a Cubs, Bears, or Bulls hat, which is probably, Jared said, where I got my love for hats, too. And when the Cubs won the World Series in 2016, he was the first person I called. In honor of Papa's knack for telling stories, I have one anecdote to share. So, for those who were at my Nana's funeral in August, you may recall that she was put on hospice the day that mine and Leah's son, Trey, was born. And he passed away 4 days later. From that point, Nana fought for 16 long months and waited until 2 days after our daughter Teddy was born before letting go. What I didn't mention that time was Papa's story in all this. I'll get it together, hold on. So when Trey passed away, Papa was distraught, and he called me a few times to tell me he loved me and wished he could help. Months later, when I told him Leah and I were expecting a baby girl, and naming him after Trey, he was ecstatic. The next day, he called me and said, "Adam, I've been doing some thinking about names. What do you think about the name Teddy for a girl?" And I was truly shocked because little did he know, Leah and I had just landed on that name, Teddy, a couple days before. After that phone call, our decision was made. We could not ignore that sign, and he was honored to have played a part. Then last week, the day Papa passed, the hospice nurse came to pick him up and bring him to his resting place. The nurse's name was Trey. A wise man once said that coincidences are God's way of showing that he's paying attention. Well, Papa, God is paying attention. Rest easy, Papa. Leah and I love you and we'll miss you.
Call on Leroy's granddaughter, Alyssa.
Okay. Sorry, there's a lot of people here. Okay. Hello. My name is Alyssa, Leroy's granddaughter. To be honest, despite the deja vu, I don't feel very prepared for today. Well, now you all know, not most of you. Only a few short months ago, we stood in this same room and said goodbye to our beloved Nana. And I wrote down my thoughts in the same notebook. You see, sorry. Okay. You see, up until a few months ago, my papa could still remember addresses and cross streets and neighbors and old buddies and long closed places. I was always in awe of his memory and how he could recall so many stories, not only from when my dad and uncles were growing up, but from throughout his lifetime as well. He kept his mind sharp with his dedication to his programs, like 60 Minutes, the nightly news, and many TV game shows like Jeopardy and Millionaire. He not only loved telling stories and jokes, as you've heard as a theme here today, but he also loved dropping random facts and did you knows and awaiting your surprised reaction so that he could teach you something. He loved making people laugh. One unique lesson and personality trait that I absorbed directly from my papa is that he believed that there was value in everything and everyone. I'd say that some with a less empathetic connection to things might say he just liked holding on to stuff. However, I saw and understood how to him, everything had either a memory, a story, a potential future use, a value, or an opportunity for someone attached to it. I saw firsthand how in his home, with all of these things that he held on to, he kept alive the stories of so many various family members, especially his parents. For example, growing up my entire life, there was a large painting of a rabbi in my grandparents' living room. I never knew why, but it was a symbol of the time spent in that home for me. When the house was sold, I told my papa that I'd saved the painting of the rabbi, and I asked him about it. He was happy. He told me that he'd found that picture one day after his father had passed away, and that even though he wasn't a rabbi and that he didn't particularly look like the man in the painting, that his dad always used to drink tea out of a saucer-style cup, just like the one the rabbi was holding in the painting. It made him happy because it always reminded him of his father. I never got to know my great-grandfather, so even this one small story about him meant the world to me. I will always regret not having the opportunity to capture and record more of my papa's stories like these. We all wanted Papa to be proud of us, and he was. He would read through piles and piles of magazines and newspapers, and he would find any article or reference, first to our schools, our majors, and then later our companies and industries. Anything that he thought could be of interest to us, and he would save it. He was the kind of guy that would give you a bit of a hard time because he wanted to continue to push you. But when you weren't around, he'd tell others how proud of you he was. Sorry. My papa was a tough guy, and as a 90s kid, there were not many Leroys. So I distinctly remember telling all of my camp friends that Bad, Bad Leroy Brown was actually written about my papa. I was proud of him, and he always spoke up for what he valued and believed in. He was very clear and adamant with what he believed to be right from wrong, and he did believe in change. When it comes to my family, it took some patience and tough conversations to get to where we eventually did, but I couldn't be more grateful. He called only specifically to ask for Ashley and gave her as hard of a time as the rest of us. For example, by telling her to get the black tux instead of the white one for our wedding because she'd get much more use out of it. In any case, he told us both that he loved us and we both loved him back. Over the past few years and months, Our family has tried to advocate for him the way that he deserved. Unfortunately, repeated injury, sickness, and hospital transfers post his stroke really took a toll. I want to be very clear, however, that I wholeheartedly reject any idea that he gave up or that he didn't fight post losing Nana. That was not the case. My papa defeated all odds many times over and was one of the strongest people that I have ever and probably will ever know. He did try to muster up the strength to get better, and I saw it firsthand, and even though the odds didn't end up in his favor. The last time we spoke was on the 10th, and we were able to blow kisses and say I love you to each other, and I'm very beyond grateful for that. I know Adam spoke a little bit about signs. Papa, I'll keep looking out for a sign until I know for sure that it's from you. Please don't take too long. Ashley and I need you to look over and protect us. We're proud of you, and we will always love you, Papa.
Call on Leroy's son, Steve, please.
It's going to be very difficult to follow these acts because everything they said is so true about him, and there's a lot of repetition, but it's all great stuff. So you might hear some of that again, a little bit of it. I want to welcome everyone today. Good afternoon. As we've stated before, unfortunately, we are saddened again to be back at the chapel approximately 3.5 months after the passing of our mom, Irma Levy. I would like to thank all our family and friends for being here today to honor Dad, Leroy Levy. He was the tough but loving patriarch of our family. For those of you who do not know me, I am Steve, the eldest of the 3 brothers. While Dad was a great storyteller and loved to talk, I would like to share some of my experiences and stories growing up. My first real memory of my dad being a tough but loving parent was when we had moved to the north side of Chicago. I had then learned how to ride a bike and went out for a ride down the block. I got my foot caught in the spokes of my bike and was in a great deal of pain. I screamed out a swear word, which I must have heard from all the cussing Dad did at home. Nonetheless, my brother Dan heard me scream out the swear word, and as the loving brother that he was, he told my dad. That hasn't changed much. No one seemed too concerned about my pain, but Dad brought me into the house and punished me by washing my mouth out with a bar of soap. I didn't even know a bar of soap could fit into a child's mouth. This is true. This was the first time I remember being punished for something. However, when it was all said and done, Dad told me he loved me and was trying to teach me a lesson that I'll never forget. I really did not use any foul language after that incident, but maybe I cussed out my brother privately. Learning lessons through childhood. As I got older, my relationship with Dad grew. In some of my later grade school years, I had perfect attendance and won Sox tickets. Dad would take me to the Sox games, even though we were true blue Cub fans. I really enjoyed being with him and sharing the father and son experience, but after about the 6th or 7th inning, I wanted to go home since I didn't like the Sox and didn't follow them. Sorry to all you Sox fans out there, but I still feel the same way. Going to Sox games then led to Dad getting tickets for Cub games and Blackhawk games. For the Cub games, we usually had good seats, but for the Blackhawk games, we always sat in the first row on the glass at the old Chicago Stadium, which was an incredibly exciting experience. I loved the crowd, the noise, the action, the fights, but truly being with Dad is what really counted. Dad was a die-hard Chicago sports fan, something that he instilled in me that has since been carried over to my 2 sons. When I was in high school, I worked at McDonald's in Chicago at Devon and Western. Besides his police job, when Dad had nights free, he worked as a security guard inside the restaurant. I really enjoyed the connection we had being in the same work environment. And he loved to tell stories and talk to customers, as well as my friends, coworkers, and that was very important as I went through my high school years and then in developing relationships in college and in the workforce after graduation. I also worked at a fast food restaurant owned by some of my dad's police friends. Dad was always a part of my growth and development in learning to become a responsible adult, treating everyone with respect, and appreciating the opportunities given to me. Dad was very influential in making all of this happen. Going on to college, Dad said, "You have 2 choices, the University of Illinois at Circle Campus or the University of Illinois at Champaign-Urbana." That was it. There were no other choices. Luckily, I was fortunate to have been admitted to the University of Illinois at Champaign-Urbana and went on to become a CPA. Dad was never prouder of my accomplishments, and both he and Mom always made me feel that whatever I put my mind to, I could achieve. I owe them both so much for their guidance in helping me deal with so many added responsibilities that life brings us as we get older, including marriage and expanded family. Family values were instilled in us. We always had dinner together as a family, although Dad always had the news on during dinner. Sundays were especially memorable. From the time we woke up until late in the day, we would stay in our pajamas and watch football with Dad. After the games, we would have dinner while Dad watched 60 Minutes. We were not allowed to speak. 1 hour of complete silence with no exceptions. That was punishment enough. Dad was an incredibly intelligent and well-read man. His day was not complete until he read the Tribune and Sun-Times, as well as multiple other newsworthy magazines from cover to cover. He would frequently save articles that he thought would interest us. He loved to discuss politics, current events, sports, or any other topic that was brought up. He always had great insight and a wealth of information and a memory for details like no one ever knew. His memory never failed to amaze us all. Dad was an extremely proud grandfather, Papa, to his 3 grandchildren and great-grandchildren. Even during his health decline, we would consistently show him pictures and videos on our phones that always made him smile and want to see more. Dad has had many health battles in his lifetime, but until the stroke that occurred in the middle of August 2024, 1 week before Mom passed away, he was as tough as nails. Every time something happened, such as a fall, a visit to the ER, the diabetes issues, his congestive heart failure, pneumonia, he continued to fight. We always thought of him as the Energizer bunny that just kept on ticking. He had a strong will to live, but once he had to move from the memory care facility that he was living at with Mom so he could watch over her, to various rehab and nursing home facilities over the last few months, his health had declined rapidly. As a family, we made the decision to put him on hospice about 10 days ago. While Dad had a weak heart, his inner strength was amazing, which probably came from his tough mentality as a police officer. There were many calms before the storm, but Dad is now at peace with Mom. I want to pay special thanks to my brothers, Dan and Bob, as well as my wife, Lisa, for the commitment they made to both my mom and dad. Over the last 3 years, when they entered the Carrington Care Memory Care, till Dad's final day at the nursing home in Long Grove. This is what true family is. We can all lay our heads on our pillows at night, knowing we did everything in our power to make our parents' later years in life as comfortable as possible. Dad, when you were able to speak a couple of weeks ago, you said you wanted to go home to be with Mom. You are now together in harmony and peace. I will love you forever.
Call on Leroy's son, Bob.
Here we are again, gathered together. Like everybody said, I'm going to try not to repeat really too much of all the beautiful words that were said. I did remember to bring my water, my gum, my chewing gum, and some notes, a little bit of notes. But I did forget my reading glasses, so I can't really, without the reading glasses, really see too well, honestly. But I appreciate everybody that's here on this cold day, and for being here, I thank you. Like the rabbi and my brothers had said about my dad had many roles of dad and granddad and great-granddad, member of the Shomrim. I'd also like to mention how he was a member of Ezra's Israel Synagogue for many years. I was born in 1964, the year that my parents got the house in Rogers Park on Fairfield. And ever since I remember, parents were members of Ezra's Israel, which was at Lawton, California, in Rogers Park. You know, my dad gave many speeches in his lifetime, bar mitzvahs, weddings, Shomrim, as they mentioned, was very involved. My cousins know all of this. Growing up, he would also sing, as maybe they remember, at bar mitzvahs and weddings, and he actually had a very nice voice. My mother really loved music as well. I would say that her music was like considered now that they call contemporary adult music, like Neil Diamond and Barbra Streisand, Barry Manilow. My dad loved the crooners of Mel Torme, Frank Sinatra, guys like that. So he kind of, when he sounded, I think, like them. He was a very nice voice. And I remember specifically the song that he would sing a lot to my mother was called All the Way. And Frank Sinatra did it, Mel Torme, all these type of crooners did a cover of that song. But it was really great the way my dad did it, and it meant so much to him. And that was how he was, and I think he chose that song because that was like one of his mottos. So I'll pause for my water for a second. He loved all the way, he loved hard, and he was tough, like they all said. And you didn't want to get on his bad side in any way. So he's a great friend to have and a great person, a great man that we all here honoring today. And I just want to say I love you, Dad. and I'm grateful to be here, and I appreciate everybody.
Leroy's son, Dan.
Thank you to everyone who braved the cold to be here today to celebrate and honor our dad. I want to thank my loving sister-in-law, Lisa, for everything you have done for Mom and Dad, especially in the past 4 years. Your tireless efforts to keep them safe and healthy, your advocacy for their care, your dealing with doctors, nurses, therapists, pharmacies has been amazing to witness. Thank you for taking care of them as if they were your own parents. I love you. Thank you to Deputy Chief Bruce Rotner for your kind words. Dad was so proud of all you accomplished, and he was honored to have you as his loyal friend. Let me tell you something about Leroy Lewis Levy that you do not know. You do not know that his middle name was made up by him so he could have a stage name that did not sound so Jewish. Yes, Lee Lewis. That is true. Dad loved to sing and always loved to entertain. When he was in high school, he sang at Carnegie Hall in New York City. Being the son of a policeman had its privileges. I knew that I was always protected by Dad, both as a father and a cop. But the disadvantage was I was held to a pretty high standard. That leads me to my first story about my dad and his tough love. I was about 12 years old, and after school one day, a friend asked me to go with him to Woolworth's. When I got back home, Dad asked where I had been. I told him Woolworth's. He asked who I was with. I told him. He knew the kid was a bad kid. He got on my face and said, "What did you steal?" I said nothing. He repeated his question a little louder. I told him just a couple little toys. He then grabbed me by the back of the neck and dragged me across the alley to where the kid lived. The kid's father was a police lieutenant. That didn't matter. Dad banged on his back door. His father answered, and Dad said, "Your son and my son are no longer friends." Dad then dragged me back home, turned on the front left burner of the stove. He then put my hand about 2 inches over the flame and said, "If you ever steal again, I will burn your effing hand off." Well, I'm 64. I have 2 hands. One day, Steve and I went to the schoolyard to play basketball. We were shooting hoops, and 2 older boys came and kicked us off the court. So we went home. Dad was getting dressed for work and asked why we came home so early. We told him. Dad said, "Let's go." The 3 of us walked back to the schoolyard, Dad in uniform, and told the bullies that the court is ours, and if they ever bother us again, he'd arrest them. The bullies thought we had called the police on them. In the 1990s, I had Bull Seasons tickets, and I wanted to take Dad to see Michael Jordan play. Dad drove down, and when he gets to the United Center on Madison, he stops the car right in front of the main entrance. A policeman waves us to keep on moving. Dad rolls down the window, shows him his star, and tells him he talked to his boss and it's all arranged. The cop says, "Sarge, just leave the car right here and leave the keys in the car." Dad then takes out a $10 bill and hands it to me and tells me to go shake the cop's hand. I said, "No, Dad, this was your idea." He says, "Go do it." So I did it. When the game was over, the car was right where we left it. My dad's life was all about influence and honor. He taught me it's not what you know, but who you know. Stand up straight, look people in the eye, and have a firm handshake. A man's word is his bond. And if a man effed you over, then there would be consequences for that. Dad helped so many people, not just policemen, but his neighbors, his friends, and everyday people. Dad loaned people money at a nominal interest rate, of course. He wrote his favors down on paper and he kept them in his shirt pocket. All of his shirts needed to have a pocket for his papers, his pen, his notes. Dad never carried a wallet. He always had about $500 on him wrapped in a large rubber band in his right front pocket. And he carried his star and his gun in his back right pocket. That was Dad, a man of routine and ritual. Dad had a guy for everything. If you needed a plumber, he had a guy. If you needed a roofer, he had a guy. If he didn't have a guy for something, then he knew a guy that had a guy for it. And Dad was frugal. He needed to be on a policeman's salary. Dad did anything to save a buck. Dad was a man's man, a tough guy cop. He stood only 5 feet and 9 3/4 inches tall, but to me he was a giant. He was so strong. His grip could crush you. He wanted me to be as tough as he was. When I was in law school, Dad asked me if I had lined up a summer job. I, of course, had not. Dad tells me he got me a job as a garbage man for the summer at the 48th Ward. Well, after my first day at work, after riding on the back of a garbage truck, I was filthy and disgusted. When I got home, I told Dad I was quitting and not going back to work tomorrow. Dad said, "Not only are you not quitting, but you are working every day this summer as a garbage man. You don't know what I did to get you this job." So guess what? I was a garbage man for the whole summer. Another life lesson from Dad. Dad taught me how to tie a tie, and Dad taught me how to drive. When I graduated from law school, Dad had 2 custom suits made for me, and he bought me my first car, a 1987 Olds Delta 88. He told me he was paying for half of it, and the other half I would pay him back. I never missed a payment. That was Dad teaching me responsibility. If it was up to Mom, I would have paid nothing. Dad was always great on giving us birthday presents. If I ever asked Dad where he got my gifts, the answer was always one of 3 choices. 1, what's the difference? Don't worry about it. 2, it fell off a truck. Or 3, I took it off a dead guy. Dad was the original Archie Bunker, a man with a good heart, but a man that was not always politically correct. He used rough language, and most of his stories had several F's in them. But he was a loving and loyal friend to so many people. On any given day, there were cops in my house hanging out and drinking coffee. Great men, funny men. They loved Dad and would do anything for him. Dad loved to take me for a ride. He'd say, "Get in the car, we're going to Joe the tailor." He'd say, "Get in the car, we're going to the uniform store on Roosevelt Road." He'd say, "Get in the car, we're going for a haircut." That was the greatest bonding that a boy could have with his dad, hanging out and listening to men talk like men. I learned more in those outings than in any college class I took. Dad wanted to be a lawyer. He went for 2 years to John Marshall and then met Mom. He left school to marry Mom and start a family. So I became a lawyer, maybe partly for Dad. Dad spent 43 years as a policeman, mostly as a sergeant. He took his job and his responsibility very seriously. Hundreds of cops owe their careers to Dad. Dad loved being a cop. He loved the power it gave him. His star, 1592, that was his calling card. He was like Superman when he had that star in his pocket. Dad was a storyteller and a joke teller. He was the life of the party and a great public speaker. He loved being one of the founders of the Shomrim and the leader of a Jewish police organization. He loved being Jewish. And Dad was the smartest person I have ever known. His vast knowledge was amazing. His memory for events and facts from long ago was so vivid. He had tremendous recall down to the smallest detail. He loved all sports, as you know, and he never left the house without a hat on his head. He loved all of my friends. He would keep them up until the early hours of the morning, telling them police stories about shootings and prostitutes and robberies. And all my friends, they loved my dad. My grandfather, David Levy, came to America from Persia. He didn't speak much English, and he needed help to assimilate here. I think Dad saw so many people helping his immigrant father, and that is why he devoted himself to helping people that were not born here in America. Dad had friends from Greece, from Russia, from India, Pakistan, Indonesia, Lebanon, all over the world. He helped them with their English. He helped them write menus for their restaurants. He helped them with their business licenses, and he did what he could to make life here for them just a little easier. I think that was his way of giving back to honor his own father. Leroy L. Levy was a good, loyal, and honorable man, and he was a good father and a good husband. He did everything he could to give us a good life. And when we went to college, as Steve said, he got a second job sitting at a McDonald's at night doing security so we could have a better life than he had. Dad, I know you love me more than anything, and I know you were proud of me. I was so proud of you and so proud to be your son. You were my hero. Thank you for loving us and taking care of us and for the great life you and Mom gave us. I will love you forever. May you rest in peace.
Leroy, you might be gone from us physically, but the way you lived your life will be forever etched in our hearts. We pray, eternal God, creator, merciful Father of all, your children bowed in grief seek light to dispel the dark gloom which threatens to overwhelm them. Be gracious to those who mourn, for they are in distress. Bless them with your compassion, ease the burden of sorrow, send them light and peace, for it is written, fear not, for I am with you. Be not dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you, I will help you, I will sustain you within my power, and let us say, Amen. Please rise for the final prayer. Emale rachamim shochein bamromim hamtzei menucha nechona kamfei ashchina b'malos kedoshim metorim kezoyar rakia masirin es nishmas label ben David Halevi shohalach liolamo began eden tehei menuchaso lochein bala rachamim Hastereu b'seisik nefecho liyolamim, utzror b'tzror achayim es nishmaso, adenohu nachlaso, v'yanuach b'shalom amishkavo, v'nomar, Amen. O God, exalted and full of compassion, grant perfect peace in your sheltering presence among the holy and pure. To the soul of our beloved Leroy Levy, who has gone to his eternal home, Master of mercy, we beseech you. Remember all the worthy and righteous deeds that he performed in the land of the living. May his soul be bound up in the bond of life. The Lord is his portion. May he rest in peace, and let us say, Amen. We're going to now recite the final Kaddish. I'm going to give you the hand signal. You'll recite Amen after me, please. Yiskadal v'yiskadash shemei rabbo. Amen. Boma divrach Yerusei v'yamlich machusei v'chayechon v'yomechon v'chayei d'chol beis Yisrael ba'agalo v'zman kariv v'imru Amen. Yehei shemei rabba mevarach l'olam l'olmei olmaya. Yisparach v'yishtabach v'yispar v'yisroman v'yisnasei v'yisadar v'yisaleh v'yisalo shmei d'kutsha barich hu. Li'ela min kol b'chasav v'shirasa Tush b'chasav v'nechamasa, damaram b'yama v'imru, Amen. Yehi Shlama Rabba Min Shemaya, V'chayim Aleinu, V'al Kol Yisrael V'emru, Amen. Oseh Shalom B'mamav, V'yasa Shalom Aleinu, V'al Kol Yisrael V'emru, Amen. May He who make peace in His high heaven grant peace on all mankind, and let us say Amen. You may be seated, please.
Ladies and gentlemen, the interment service will continue at Memorial Park Cemetery, located at 9900 Grosse Point Road here in Skokie. The family will be returning to the funeral home for Shiva. They'll be together till 9 p.m. this evening. Memorial contributions to the Shomrim Society of Illinois, the endowment fund, would be appreciated. For those of you who will be driving in the funeral procession to the cemetery, the procession will be forming in our parking lot. Please obtain an orange safety funeral sticker to place on the right-hand side of your windshield. Have your bright lights and hazard lights on at all times. For additional measures of safety, we will be providing a car in the back of the procession to hopefully keep other cars from entering the procession. Please use your horn liberally as you're going through the intersections. Please do not speak or text on your cellular phone while driving to the cemetery. For those of you who need information about the charities of the Shiva that are watching online, that information is on the funeral home's website. At this time, I invite the family members and cousins who have been asked to serve as pallbearers to please come forward. As honorary pallbearers, I invite anybody who served in the police or even the armed forces to please come forward to serve as honorary pallbearers. Please rise as we escort the casket of Sergeant Leroy L. Levy from the chapel, along with Rabbi Wolf. Then you may return to your cars. This concludes the service.